The creak of wagon wheels stopped abruptly in the Missouri wilderness. Sarah Mitchell gripped her swollen belly as the wagon master raised his hand, signaling the entire train to halt. She had felt something wasn't right all morning, but the sudden stillness churned her stomach with dread. 10 wagons stretched behind her, each carrying families she had grown to know over the past 3 months of their journey west. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. James Bradford, the wagon master, dismounted with deliberate slowness. His boots hit the dusty ground with a finality that made Sarah's heart race. Around them, the forest seemed to hold its breath. Even the birds had gone quiet. Her husband, Thomas, stepped down from their wagon, his face pale despite the summer heat. "We need to talk about the supplies," Bradford said, his voice carrying across the clearing. But Sarah knew it wasn't about supplies. The way the other settlers avoided her gaze told her everything she needed to know. The cholera outbreak that had claimed 3 lives in the past week had changed something fundamental in their small community. "Sarah," Bradford continued, removing his hat to wipe his brow, "your condition, it's putting a strain on our resources." "My condition?" Sarah's voice cracked. "You mean my baby? The child I've carried for 8 months while helping to cook, tend the sick and mend clothes for everyone in this train." The silence that followed was suffocating. Margaret Walsh, who had been like a mother to her since they'd left Independence, couldn't meet her eyes. Even Dr. Abner Coleman, who had examined her just 3 days ago and pronounced both her and the baby healthy, looked away. Thomas stepped forward, his hands trembling. "Bradford, we've discussed this. My wife is due any day now. You can't seriously consider—" The vote was unanimous among the council, Bradford interrupted. 23-2. "We can't risk the welfare of 37 people for one family." Sarah's knees buckled. The vote. They had met last night while she was sleeping, and they had voted her out. Not just her, but Thomas too, because husbands didn't abandon their wives, not even out here. The sun was barely above the horizon when the wagon train resumed its journey westward, leaving behind a small clearing where a single wagon stood silent and alone. Sarah sat on the tailgate watching the dust cloud grow smaller until it disappeared entirely beyond the tree line. She hadn't expected the abandonment to feel this complete, this final. Even the wheel ruts from the other wagons were already beginning to blend with the forest floor. "We have enough supplies for maybe 10 days, Thomas said, climbing up beside her. His voice was steady, but she could hear the strain beneath it. "If we ration carefully, perhaps 2 weeks. And then what?" She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the baby's movements underneath. The child had been particularly active since dawn, as if sensing the change in their circumstances. Thomas wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "Then we figure out our next move. The settlement at Fort Davidson isn't more than 50 miles southwest. We could—" A sharp pain cut through Sarah's words. She gasped, gripping the wagon's edge as the contraction seized her. Thomas's face went white. "How long?" he asked. "That's the 3rd one this morning," she admitted. "They're about 20 minutes apart." "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because Bradford was looking for any excuse to leave us behind." Thomas ran his hands through his hair, a gesture she recognized as his way of fighting panic. "All right. We need shelter. The wagon won't be enough when the baby comes." They spent the morning searching the immediate area. Sarah, despite the periodic contractions, insisted on helping. They found a shallow cave about 200 yards from where Bradford had abandoned them. It wasn't ideal. The entrance was partially obscured by brush, and the interior was damp, but it would protect them from the elements. "I'll bring the wagon closer," Thomas said, already heading back through the trees. "We'll need to be quick. Those clouds are coming in fast." Sarah leaned against the cave entrance, watching him go. The contractions were closer now, perhaps 15 minutes apart. She pressed her forehead against the cool rock, trying to remember everything Dr. Coleman had told her about labor. Not that his knowledge would matter much out here, with no one to assist. The crack of a branch made her spin around. Her heart pounded as she scanned the forest. The settlement had warned them about dangers, wolves, bears, and natives who didn't take kindly to strangers. Most concerning were the Shawnee, who had been increasingly aggressive towards settlers encroaching on their hunting grounds. Another contraction hit, stronger than before. Sarah bit her lip to keep from crying out, but a small whimper escaped. When she opened her eyes, she wasn't alone. A tall figure stood at the edge of the clearing. He wore buckskins that blended with the forest shadows, his dark hair braided with what looked like feathers. In his hand, he held a bow. A Shawnee. Sarah's breath caught. She had heard the stories, massacres, kidnappings, entire families slaughtered. Now she was alone, vulnerable, with nothing but a small knife to defend herself. The man tilted his head, studying her. His face was weathered but young, maybe 30 summers. His eyes were sharp, intelligent. He said something in his language, the words flowing like water over stones. Sarah pressed herself against the cave wall. I don't understand. He stepped closer, gesturing to her belly. Another contraction gripped her, and this time she couldn't suppress the cry of pain. When she opened her eyes again, the man was closer, his bow now slung across his back. He pointed to her, then to the ground, making a circular motion with his hand. Sarah gasped as the pain subsided. My husband, he'll be back soon. Please, I just need... The sound of distant thunder cut her off. Or was it thunder? The man's head snapped toward the sound, his body tensing. Without warning, he grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the cave entrance. No! Stop! Sarah tried to resist, but another contraction weakened her. The man supported her weight effortlessly, guiding her deeper into the cave. Once inside, he began, speaking rapidly, gesturing toward the forest. Sarah caught fragments of meaning in his tone, urgency, warning. He was trying to tell her something. The thunder grew louder, and now she recognized it for what it was. Horses, many horses. The man disappeared deeper into the cave, returning moments later with an armful of branches and leaves. He arranged them near the entrance, creating a natural screen. Then he handed her a stick, about the length of her forearm, and demonstrated biting it. For the pain, she realized. Heavy raindrops began to fall outside, quickly becoming a downpour. The sound of horses grew closer, accompanied by rough voices speaking English. Raiders, the lawless men who preyed on settlers and natives alike. Search the area, someone shouted. I saw fresh wagon tracks. The Shawnee hunter pressed a finger to his lips, then moved to the cave entrance. He drew his knife, a wicked-looking blade that gleamed even in the dim light. Sarah's heart pounded as she listened to the raiders approach. Found the wagon, another voice called. Still warm, they can't be far. Probably ran when they heard us coming, the first voice replied. Spread out, check for caves. Sarah bit down on the stick as another contraction hit. The pain was becoming unbearable, and she could feel the baby's position shifting. The man looked back at her, his expression unreadable, but somehow reassuring. He returned to her side and took her hand, squeezing gently as if to say, be strong. Footsteps approached the cave entrance. The hunter tensed, ready to spring. Sarah could barely focus through the pain, but she watched in amazement as the man moved with absolute silence to a position behind the thick brush screen. Nothing here, the raider said, his voice so close Sarah could have touched him. Just some dried leaves. Keep looking, came the distant reply. They're worth more alive than dead, especially the woman. The hunter's grip on his knife tightened. Sarah understood then. He was protecting her. This man, who owed her nothing, who belonged to a people many settlers considered enemies, was standing between her and danger. The raider's footsteps receded. Sarah let out a shaky breath, but the hunter motioned for continued silence. They waited in the darkness as voices called back and forth, gradually growing more distant. Finally, the hunter relaxed slightly. He returned to her side just as the most intense contraction yet seized her. Sarah's muffled scream seemed to tear from her soul. The hunter nodded, speaking urgently in his language while making gestures. Suddenly she understood. He was telling her to trust him. With surprising gentleness, he helped her lie down on the cave floor. He arranged his skin shirt beneath her as padding, then began speaking what sounded like a prayer or chant. The rhythm of his words seemed to match her contractions, helping her manage the pain. Time lost meaning in the darkness of the cave. The hunter never left her side, occasionally leaving to check the entrance, but always returning. He had natural medicines in a pouch at his waist, leaves he crushed and had her chew to help with the pain, and a root that seemed to calm the baby's restless movements. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Somewhere in the endless cycle of pain and brief respites, Sarah learned his name, Nayeli, meaning I love you in his language. He had lost his own wife to sickness 2 winters past. He conveyed through gestures. His child had died with her. That knowledge created a bridge between them that transcended language. Hours passed. The rain outside turned to a drizzle, then stopped entirely. The raiders' voices had long since faded away. Sarah was exhausted, her strength nearly spent, when the final push came. Nayeli supported her shoulders, speaking words of encouragement. She didn't need to understand to feel their meaning. The baby's first cry echoed off the cave walls. Nayeli helped her deliver the afterbirth. His movements practiced and confident. He used his knife to cut the cord, then wrapped the infant in the softest part of his buckskin shirt. "A daughter," he said in careful English, the first English words she'd heard him speak. He placed the baby in her arms with a gentleness that brought tears to her eyes. Sarah looked down at her newborn daughter, perfect and whole, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything. "Thank you," she whispered to Nayeli. "Thank you," he smiled for the first time, revealing strong teeth. "Safe now," he said. "Rest now." As Sarah drifted into an exhausted sleep, her daughter nursing quietly, she heard Nayeli moving about the cave. He was gathering wood for a fire, careful to position it so the smoke would dissipate without drawing attention. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was his silhouette against the cave mouth, keeping watch over them both. When she awoke, the world had changed. Thomas hadn't returned. The sun was setting again. Had a full day passed, Nayeli was roasting small game. Over the fire, the savory smell making her stomach growl. He noticed her stirring and brought her water in a hollowed-out gourd. "My husband?" she asked, her voice rough with sleep. Nayeli's expression darkened. He made gestures toward the forest, then mimicked riding and falling. He drew a finger across his throat. "Dead?" The word felt hollow in her mouth. "The raiders?" He nodded solemnly. Then he pointed to tracks near the cave, hoofprints heading back toward where they'd left the wagon. Thomas must have been on his way back when the raiders found him. Nayeli had discovered his body and covered it with stones, he indicated, a burial, though not in the way Thomas would have wanted. Sarah felt oddly empty. The grief would come later, she knew, but for now she was numb. She looked down at her daughter, who stirred and began to fuss. Her milk had come in overnight, and the baby latched eagerly. "What now?" she asked aloud, not really expecting an answer. Nayeli watched her nurse the baby, then spoke carefully. "You come, village, safe." "Your village?" "But they hate settlers." "Not hate." He struggled with the words. "Fear. Different now. You, baby. Family now." Sarah understood. His grief for his lost family, her desperate situation with a newborn, these circumstances had created a bond that transcended the usual boundaries. But would his people accept her? As if reading her thoughts, Nayeli added, "I speak. Chief knows. Me. Lost much. Understand loss." The baby finished nursing, and Nayeli reached for her. Sarah hesitated only a moment before placing her daughter in his arms. He held her with the confidence of someone who had done this before, rocking gently while humming a soft tune. The baby quieted immediately, her tiny fist curling around his finger. "Name?" he asked. Sarah hadn't thought of names much. She and Thomas had discussed possibilities, but never settled on anything. Looking at her daughter, nestled safely in the arms of the man who had saved them both, something felt right about leaving the past behind. "Hope," she said finally. "Her name is Hope." Nayeli smiled again, that rare expression that transformed his serious face. He repeated it carefully, making the foreign sounds his own. "Hope. Good name." Over the next 3 days, Nayeli nursed Sarah back to strength with a combination of game meat, wild vegetables, and healing teas. He showed her how to identify safe plants and explained through gestures how his people viewed the forest as a living provider. Her European education had taught her to see it as something to be tamed or feared. On the 4th day, Nayeli announced it was time to move. Sarah's strength had returned enough for travel, and the baby was thriving. He fashioned a carryboard from bent wood and soft leather, explaining that Shawnee mothers use such devices to transport infants while leaving their hands free for work. Before they left, Nayeli took her to the stone cairn where he had buried Thomas. Sarah knelt beside it, placing her hand on the rough stones. She said a brief prayer, though the words felt insufficient. Thomas had been a good man, if not always a brave one. He hadn't deserved to die alone, afraid, at the hands of lawless men. "I'm sorry," she whispered, knowing he couldn't hear. "I'll take care of Hope, I promise." Nayeli waited patiently, then helped her stand. He'd packed their few belongings, her small travel trunk, some blankets, and a few tools from the wagon. Everything else they'd left behind. A new life required traveling light. The journey to his village took 2 days of careful travel. Nayeli moved like a shadow through the forest, teaching her to step quietly and avoid breaking branches. He pointed out signs of animals and weather that Sarah had never noticed before. Each stop for rest or feeding Hope became a lesson in survival. On the evening of the 2nd day, they reached a clearing where the forest opened onto a meadow. At its far edge, Sarah could see the distinctive dome shapes of Shawnee dwellings. Smoke from cooking fires drifted lazily into the evening sky. Children's laughter reached across the distance, and for a moment, Sarah felt a stab of fear mixed with hope. Nayeli touched her arm, drawing her attention. "Wait here. I speak first. Prepare a way." She watched him walk toward the village with his characteristic silence. Soon, figures emerged from the dwellings, men with weapons at first, then curious women and children. Nayeli's voice carried across the clearing as he gestured back toward where she stood. The conversation seemed to go on forever. Sarah bounced Hope gently, trying to soothe her fussing as she grew hungry. What if they refused? What if they saw her as just another settler to be driven away or worse? Finally, Nayeli returned with an older man who carried himself with unmistakable authority. The chief, Sarah assumed. He studied her with keen eyes that missed nothing. Her travel-worn dress, the baby in her arms, her obvious exhaustion. The chief spoke in the Shawnee language, his words flowing smoothly. Nayeli translated, his English improving with each word. "Chief asks, your name, baby name. What happened to husband?" Sarah straightened despite her fatigue. "I am Sarah Mitchell. This is Hope. My husband, he was killed by raiders. Nayeli found us, helped us, saved us." The translation flowed back and forth. The chief's expression remained neutral until Nayeli added something that made him raise his eyebrows. Whatever had been said brought the ghost of a smile to the old man's weathered face. Chief says, Nayeli tells the truth, says you strongly, baby strong, says. You have spirit like a warrior's wife. Sarah felt her throat tighten. I'm grateful for the kindness, for the chance to live. The chief nodded slowly, then spoke directly to her in halting English. Village, take you. For now, learn our ways. We see the truth in time. Relief washed over her in waves. It wasn't unconditional acceptance, but it was a chance to live, to raise her daughter, to find a new path after everything she'd known had been stripped away. As they walked toward the village, children ran ahead to announce their arrival. Women gathered near the cooking fires, their faces curious but not unkind. Nayeli stayed close, his presence a reassuring anchor in this sea of unknown faces and unfamiliar customs. An elderly woman approached, her eyes taking in the baby with particular interest. She spoke rapidly to Nayeli, who gestured to Sarah. The woman came closer, her weathered hands unexpectedly gentle as she touched Hope's tiny face. Grandmother wants to see the baby, Nayeli explained. She helps with children. Lost her own daughter, wants to help. Sarah understood the unspoken message. Loss connected them all in this place. She carefully placed Hope in the grandmother's arms, watching as the old woman's face softened with an emotion that transcended language. The next hours passed in a blur of new experiences. Nayeli led her to a dwelling at the edge of the village. His home, she realized. It was modest but well constructed, with a central fire pit and sleeping platforms along the walls. The grandmother followed, speaking rapidly to other women who brought food, blankets, and various items Sarah couldn't identify. That first night in the Shawnee village, Sarah lay on soft furs with Hope sleeping beside her. Nayeli had taken a position near the doorway, a silent guardian. The sounds of the village settling for the night were unfamiliar. Different languages, different rhythms, different life. She thought of the wagon train, probably hundreds of miles west by now. Margaret Walsh had likely taken over organizing the cooking rotations. The Hendersons were probably still complaining about the dust. Dr. Coleman was probably treating someone's blisters or fever. Life continued for them, as if she and Thomas had never existed. But here, in this moment, Sarah had something she never expected. A protector who asked for nothing in return, a community willing to consider accepting her, and a daughter who cooed softly in her sleep. The future was uncertain, but for the first time since Bradford's announcement, it held possibility. As sleep claimed her, Sarah's last conscious thought was of gratitude. For Nayeli's unexpected mercy, for the chief's willingness to wait, and for the grandmother's immediate connection to Hope. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were safe. Tonight they had a home, however temporary it might be. Beyond the dwelling's walls, the forest whispered its ancient secrets. Night birds called to each other across the darkness. Somewhere in the distance a wolf howled, not a threat, but a declaration of existence. Sarah understood the sentiment. She was still here, still fighting, still hoping, and that, for now, was enough. The sun was barely cresting the horizon when Sarah awoke to the unfamiliar sounds of the village stirring. Women hummed working songs. As they stirred cooking pots over outdoor fires, children chased each other between the dome-shaped dwellings, their laughter echoing off the surrounding trees. Young men prepared weapons for hunting parties, while elders sat in circles, smoking pipes and sharing quiet conversations. Hope stirred against her chest, beginning to fuss with hunger. Sarah sat up carefully, wincing at muscles she'd forgotten. She had. Childbirth and days of travel had left their mark. The soft furs beneath her were different from anything she'd known in her settler life, more yielding, somehow more alive. Nayeli entered the dwelling with the silent grace that seemed second nature to him. In his arms, he carried fresh water, in that same hollowed gourd she'd drunk from in the cave. "Morning brings new strength," he said, his English improving daily. "Hope needs you strong too." The grandmother, whose name Sarah learned was Singing Bird, arrived moments later, her weathered face brightening at the sight of the baby. Without hesitation, she lifted Hope from Sarah's arms, cooing in the musical Shawnee language. The infant quieted immediately, as if sensing the woman's expertise. "She lost 8 children to winter sickness," Nayeli explained quietly. 3 born strong, 5 weaker. Her daughter, Hope's age when taken. But she knows all women's secrets for keeping babies healthy. Sarah nodded, understanding this was the woman's way of healing her own losses. She watched as Singing Bird examined Hope with practiced eyes, checking her eyes, ears, and the healing umbilical cord. The old woman produced a small leather pouch, withdrawing what appeared to be dried herbs, medicine tea for new mothers. Nayeli translated as the grandmother began explaining. "Make more milk, makes you stronger faster. Our mothers drink it." 1 moon after birth, the morning routine that unfolded was both foreign and oddly familiar. Singing Bird instructed Sarah on proper positioning for nursing, while other women gathered to watch and offer advice in their language. They showed her how to wrap the baby in soft doeskin, how to position her on the carrying board for comfort. Everything had a purpose, a method refined over generations. After Hope was fed and content, 2 younger women arrived, sisters named Morning Star and Quiet River. They giggled when Nayeli introduced them, clearly amused by something. When he spoke to them in Shawnee, they laughed even harder. "They say you need proper clothes," Nayeli explained, his ears reddening slightly. "Your dress. They say it makes too much noise in the forest. Frightens animals, frightens men too." Sarah looked down at her torn and travel-stained dress, one of only 2 she owned. The thought of changing clothes seemed frivolous when survival remained uncertain, but when the women laid out carefully tanned doe-skin pieces with intricate beadwork, she understood this was more than practicality. This was inclusion. They asked, "Will you try?" Nayeli seemed uncomfortable with the request. "I will go help prepare a hunting party." Hours passed as the women worked their magic. The doeskin dress was surprisingly practical, loose enough for comfort and nursing, yet fitted, enough to move freely. Morningstar demonstrated how the moccasins were designed for silent movement, while Quiet River showed her how to braid her hair in a way that kept it from her face without the pins she'd always used. When Nayeli returned that afternoon with the hunting party, he stopped short at seeing her. Other men noticed his reaction and teased him in Shawnee. Whatever they said made his composure crack, a rare sight that brought heat to Sarah's cheeks. "You look," he struggled for the English word, "complete." That evening, as the village gathered for the communal meal, Sarah experienced her first real integration into Shawnee society. She sat with the women, Hope sleeping peacefully on the carrying board beside her. The men shared stories of the day's hunt, 3 deer taken cleanly, with respect shown to the animal spirits. Children performed a dance they'd rehearsed, mimicking hunters and prey in a display that was both entertaining and educational. The chief, whose name she learned was Gray Fox, gestured for silence. He spoke at length, his words carrying the weight of ceremony. Throughout his speech, eyes turned to Sarah. Nayeli moved closer to translate. "Chief tells the story of how you came. Says raiders who killed your husband are known enemies of our people too. Says your husband tried to protect what was his. This shows honor. Says Nayeli did what our ancestors would wish, show mercy to one in need." He paused as Grey Fox continued. "Says you have mother's fire in you. Hope shows strength. By surviving hard birth, says, we watch your spirit. If it remains true, village could become home. The finality in those words struck Sarah. This wasn't a temporary shelter anymore. This was a test, a chance to truly belong somewhere again, but only if she proved worthy. By their standards, the next morning brought Sarah's first real challenge. Blue Wing, the village medicine woman, approached their dwelling with a stern expression. She spoke rapidly to Nayeli, gesturing to Sarah. "She says you must learn medicine if you stay." Nayeli translated carefully. "Says white women know nothing of forest healing. Says I shouldn't translate anymore. You must learn our tongue directly now." Blue Wing nodded approvingly at something in Nayeli's translation. Without another word, she beckoned Sarah to follow. Their destination was a shaded grove where various plants grew in careful cultivation. Blue Wing began pointing to different herbs, repeating their names slowly. When Sarah attempted to echo the sounds, the medicine woman shook her head, correcting pronunciation with exaggerated mouth movements. Hours passed in this patient instruction. Sarah's tongue struggled with sounds foreign to English, clicks and flowing consonants that seemed to emerge from different parts of the throat. But as morning shifted to afternoon, patterns began to emerge. Words for healing plants often contained similar sounds. Terms for preparation methods followed logical structures. Blue Wing's severe expression gradually softened into something approaching approval. When Sarah correctly identified and named a plant used for stopping bleeding without prompting, the medicine woman actually smiled, a transformation that took years off her weathered face. By the time they returned to the village, Sarah's mind buzzed with new knowledge. Blue Wing led her to a spot near the central fire where other women had gathered. They'd been preparing various dishes, and now they included Sarah in taste testing and learning recipes. Each food had its own story, its own proper preparation, its own significance for health or ceremony. That evening, as families gathered around individual fires for their meals, Nayeli brought fresh venison he'd contributed to the communal stores. Singing Bird had transformed it into a savory stew with wild vegetables and herbs. Blue Wing had helped Sarah identify that morning. "You learned fast today," Nayeli observed as they ate. Hope dozed contentedly in his arms, a scene that had become natural over the past days. Blue Wing speaks to others, says you have ears for learning. Maybe you remember our ways from another life. "Do you believe that?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. "That's soul's return?" He considered the question seriously. "Our elders teach that. Spirits travel many paths. Sometimes they find new homes in new people. My wife, she believed she knew our children from before, said their eyes showed old souls in young bodies." The moon rose full that night, silver light filtering through the smoke hole in their dwelling's roof. Hope had established a rhythm of sleeping in longer stretches, giving Sarah more rest. But tonight, sleep eluded her. She could hear Nayeli's steady breathing from his sleeping platform across the fire pit, yet her mind churned with questions about her place here. The soft rustle of the door covering made her start. Singing Bird entered, carrying a bundle wrapped in soft leather. She sat beside Sarah and carefully unwrapped it to reveal an exquisite beaded cradle board. Through gestures and her limited Shawnee vocabulary, Sarah understood this had belonged to Singing Bird's lost children. The old woman traced the intricate bead patterns, each design telling a story of protection. She placed Hope in the cradle board to demonstrate its use, then handed it to Sarah with words that needed no translation. This was trust. This was acceptance. Dawn brought unexpected visitors. 3 riders approached from the east, not raiders but traders who regularly dealt with the village. 2 were French trappers, the third a Delaware Indian who served as interpreter. They brought news from the wider world, increased tensions between settlers and various tribes, reports of wagon trains being harassed, and, most importantly, questions about a missing settler family. Sarah's heart constricted as Nayeli translated their inquiry. They ask if the village knows of woman with a husband and a new baby. Say other settlers search. Say they worry for safety. The traders didn't specifically mention the wagon train that had abandoned her, but Sarah knew others must have arrived in the territories by now. News of her disappearance might have reached settlements, sparked searches. The life she'd thought permanently behind her suddenly felt much closer. Grey Fox remained non-committal with the traders, neither confirming nor denying knowledge of any settlers. After they departed with their trade goods, furs and herbs in exchange for metal tools, and fabric, he called a village council. Sarah was not invited to attend, but Naeli brought her the results that evening. "Council decides," he said carefully, "that your presence is known now by some. Settlers will search more. This could bring danger to the village." Fear clutched her throat. "Are they sending me away?" "No." His response was quick, firm. "But they prepare. If settlers come searching, village must decide how to answer. Some say tell the truth, you chose to stay by choice. Others say deny knowledge, protect village from suspicion of kidnapping. What do you think?" She valued his opinion more than she wanted to admit. "I think—" He sat beside her, closer than usual. Hope slept between them, a tangible reminder of their shared experience. "I think truth has many faces. The truth of your arrival, yes, but also truth of what you become here. The raiders killed your husband, this is known. You chose life for your daughter, this is true. You learn our ways, this grows truer each day." That night's council decision would shape their immediate future, but Sarah's test of belonging continued daily. Blue Wing intensified her medicine teachings, as if preparing Sarah for greater responsibilities. Morning Star and Quiet River included her in more complex tasks, tanning hides, weaving baskets, preparing ceremonial garments. Each skill, mastered, was another thread binding her to this community. The language barrier crumbled steadily. Children were her most patient teachers, repeating words endlessly as they taught her games and songs. Elder women corrected her pronunciation while teaching her to identify edible plants and prepare traditional meals. Hunters returning from expeditions shared their knowledge of tracking and forest signs. Even skeptical warriors began to nod acknowledgement. When she passed, 10 days after the traders' visit, scouts reported movement to the south, a small group of settlers approaching on foot. Grey Fox called another hasty council while the village prepared for potential conflict. Sarah insisted on being present this time. "They might be looking for me," she argued to Grey Fox through Naeli's translation. "I can speak with them." "Explain." "My choice." The chief studied her for a long moment before responding. "If you speak to your people," Naeli translated, "you must speak true to your heart. Where does your heart live now?" The answer surprised her with its clarity. "Here," she said simply. "My heart lives here now." The settlers, 5 men from a wagon train that had followed weeks behind Sarah's original group, stumbled into the village clearing 2 hours before sunset. They were weary, hungry, and clearly surprised to encounter a seemingly peaceful village, rather than the hostile reception they'd been warned about. Sarah recognized none of them, but they instantly knew her. The leader, a sturdy man named Jacob. Crawford approached cautiously. "Mrs. Mitchell? Sarah Mitchell?" "Yes," she answered, stepping forward. Hope was secure in the beautiful cradleboard Singing Bird had gifted her, and she wore the doeskin dress Morning Star had made, purposefully displaying her integration into village life. "Thank God we found you," Crawford continued, relief evident. "We heard reports about a family lost to raiders. Your wagon train sent word to the settlements, said you'd been left behind. They asked for forgiveness, said they'd made a terrible mistake." The irony wasn't lost on Sarah. "Did they mention they voted to abandon me? 23-2. Crawford's expression shifted uncomfortably. They said, circumstances forced difficult decisions. And what circumstances brought you looking for me? Guilt, I suppose, and hope. The settlement needs women who understand the hardships of this land. Dr. Coleman specifically recommended finding you, said you had knowledge of medicine, could help others. Behind her, Sarah sensed the village watching, waiting. She'd been tested with learning their language, their customs, their skills. Now came the ultimate test, choosing between the familiar world she'd left and the new one she was building. I appreciate your concern, she said carefully. But as you can see, I've found a place already. These people saved my life and my daughter's. They've offered us home and family. Crawford and his men exchanged glances. Mrs. Mitchell, surely you understand the dangers. These are natives, savages. They might seem friendly now, but they are neither savages nor strangers, Sarah interrupted firmly. They are the Shawnee, and they've shown me more kindness than my own people did in my time of need. Gray, Fox stepped forward, his presence commanding despite his years. He spoke in careful English, apparently understanding more than he'd let on. Woman and child saved from death. They learn our ways, share our fire. We offer protection, family. This is our law, Crawford shifted nervously. Sir, Chief, we mean no disrespect, but surely you understand our concern. A white woman living among your people. It raises questions, causes talk. Questions have many answers, Grey Fox replied. This woman chooses her path. Her choice is respected. The tension in the clearing was palpable. Sarah realized this moment would define not just her future, but potentially the relationship between this village and nearby settlements. She needed to make her position absolutely clear. Gentlemen, she addressed Crawford's group formally, I am grateful for your search and your concern. Please carry back my thanks to all who worried for my welfare, but also carry this message. I have found family here. My daughter Hope will grow knowing two cultures, two sets of wisdom. This is my choice, made freely and completely. She paused, considering her next words carefully. If you seek peace with the Shawnee people, know that they are honorable. They value life, family, and wisdom. Trading goods and sharing knowledge benefits all. But understand, I speak now as one who belongs to both worlds. I will advocate for peace and fairness between our peoples. Crawford's shoulders slumped slightly. With relief or resignation, Sarah couldn't tell. I'll deliver your message, Mrs. Mitchell, but the settlement stands ready to welcome you, should you ever change your mind. As the settlers prepared to depart, Nayeli appeared beside her. He'd remained in the background during the exchange, but now he spoke softly in Shawnee. You speak truth to both peoples. This brings honor to your name. The village relaxed as Crawford's group disappeared into the forest. Children resumed their games, women returned to their tasks, and men discussed the encounter in analytical tones. But something fundamental had shifted. Sarah felt eyes on her, not with suspicion or curiosity, but with respect. That evening, as the village gathered for the evening meal, Grey Fox called for attention. He spoke at length, his words carrying the weight of announcement. Throughout his speech, tribe members nodded and called out acknowledgments. Nayeli translated quietly, Chief says today proved our strength. Both peoples saw wisdom in village decisions. Says you proved worthy of trust by speaking true to both sides. He paused as the chief continued. Say, from now on, you are not a visitor learning our ways. You are family learning old ways of your family. Singing Bird claims you as a niece. Says the village accepts this claim. Tears pricked Sarah's eyes. In the settler world, she'd been abandoned for being vulnerable. Here, vulnerability has been met with protection. Where her situation had been seen as a burden, they'd seen it as an opportunity to honor their values of mercy and family. Is this real? She whispered to Nayeli. Am I truly accepted? His hand found hers, a gesture of support that had become natural between them. As real as morning sun, as real as your courage, as real as hope's first breath. That night, alone in the dwelling they shared, Sarah considered the full weight of her choice. She'd crossed an invisible boundary today, permanently perhaps. The settler world she'd known offered familiar customs, but had proven willing to discard its own when convenient. This Shawnee village offered something different, acceptance earned through proving one's worth, belonging based on contribution rather than blood, and family created through shared experience rather than birth. Watching Hope sleep peacefully in her cradleboard, Sarah thought about the future she was choosing for her daughter. Hope would grow up knowing the healing arts of Blue Wing, the warrior training appropriate to village girls, the languages of two peoples. She'd understand forest wisdom that settlers dismissed as primitive, yet also carry knowledge of the wider world beyond the woods. And Nayeli, what was she building with the man who'd saved her life and shown such patience with her learning? They'd developed an understanding that went beyond words, a partnership in raising hope and navigating the complex space between cultures. Was this family, too? A different kind than she'd known, perhaps, but no less real. As sleep finally claimed her, Sarah's last conscious thought was a promise to herself and to Hope. They would build a life that honored both their choices and their gifts. They would be bridges between worlds, carrying wisdom in both directions. They would transform loss into purpose, abandonment into belonging. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There would be more traders, more visitors, more tests of her place in this community. But tonight, for the first time since Bradford's announcement, had shattered her world, Sarah felt truly home, not because it was familiar, but because it was earned. Not because it was comfortable, but because it was real. And that reality, hard-won and constantly challenged, held more truth than any of the certainties she'd left behind. 3 months had passed since Crawford's group departed, carrying Sarah's message of voluntary choice back to the settlements. Autumn painted the forest in brilliant reds and golds, and hope grew stronger with each passing day. She'd developed the bright smile that charmed everyone in the village, and her first attempts at babbling brought delight to all who heard. Sarah's life had taken on its own rhythm. Mornings spent with Blue Wing learning the properties of late season plants, afternoons helping prepare the village for winter, evenings sharing stories around the communal fire. Her hands grew skillful at beadwork, her ear more attuned to the nuances of Shawnee speech. Yet beneath this growing comfort, an undercurrent of tension had entered village life. Rumors from the east spoke of increasing conflict. French traders reported new forts being built by the English colonists, pushing deeper into traditional hunting grounds. Spanish agents stirred up unrest among various tribes, while Dutch merchants played all sides against each other for trading advantages. The peaceful balance that had allowed the village to thrive was shifting. Grey Fox called more frequent councils. Though Sarah couldn't attend these gatherings, she heard the debates echoing through the village as elders argued long into the night. Nayeli translated what he could without breaking confidence. Some voices advocated relocation deeper into Cherokee territory, others pushed for stronger alliances with neighboring Shawnee bands, and a few younger warriors even spoke of striking, first against encroaching settlers. "What do you think?" Sarah asked Nayeli one evening as they prepared for the evening meal. Hope cooed happily from her cradleboard, entertaining herself with the colorful beads dangling above her face. Nayeli stirred the fire thoughtfully before answering. "War brings only more war. My father told stories of the great conflicts when his father was young. Villages destroyed, families torn apart. Both sides lose much, gain little." He paused, clearly considering whether to share more. But young men see only glory in fighting. They don't understand the spirits watching from battlegrounds, crying for peace. His words proved prophetic. 2 days later, a war party of Mingo, Warriors arrived at the village, not as enemies, but as distant relatives seeking alliance. Their leader, a fierce warrior named Black Elk, brought news of settler attacks on smaller bands to the north. He'd come to convince Grey Fox to join a coalition preparing to push back. Sarah watched from the doorway of her dwelling as the Mingo delegation was formally welcomed. Black Elk's presence commanded attention. He wore the scalp locks of his enemies and carried a tomahawk adorned with silver. His eyes, when they fell on her, held a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He asked questions in rapid Shawnee, gesturing towards Sarah. Nayeli translated quietly. He asks why the village harbors a white woman, says spies have many forms, wants to know if you've brought danger to people who showed mercy. Sarah felt the weight of the village's eyes upon her. This was another test, but of a different kind. She stepped forward, addressing Black Elk in the careful Shawnee she'd been practicing. My baby and I came broken. These people made us whole. I have learned their wisdom, shared their work, kept their trust. My presence brings no danger, only another voice for peace between peoples. Black Elk studied her intently, then spoke to Grey Fox in tones too rapid for Sarah to follow. The exchange continued for several minutes before he finally nodded and turned back to her. You speak our tongue with respect, he said, switching to English for the benefit of the gathered crowd. But words alone don't prove hearts. Time will show truth. The Mingo warriors stayed for 3 days, their presence transforming the village's mood. Young men gathered eagerly to hear war stories, while women worked overtime to prepare feasts worthy of honored guests. Sarah found herself caught between worlds once again, helping with traditional preparations while listening to tales of battles that painted her former people as invaders and destroyers. On the final evening of the Mingo visit, a feast was held to honor the alliance being forged. Sarah had spent the day preparing venison and wild turkey with seasonings Blue Wing had taught her, her skill in traditional cooking now rivaling many village women. As darkness fell, drums began their hypnotic rhythm, and dancers performed ancient ceremonies. Black Elk approached where Sarah sat with Hope and Singing Bird. He carried a gourd of ceremonial wine and offered it as a gesture of respect. Village grandmother tells of your medicine learning, he said carefully. Says your hands bring healing touch. Says even suspicious Mingo should see truth before war clouds judgment. Sarah accepted the gourd and sipped the bitter liquid. Wisdom? It comes from many sources, she replied, choosing her words carefully. As a warrior learns from both victory and defeat, a healer learns from all who suffer. Distance between peoples shortens when we share knowledge. The warrior nodded slowly. Perhaps there is purpose in your presence here. If conflict comes, need for healers grows. Your mixed knowledge might save lives. His words contained both acceptance and warning. The alliance was being formed, plans discussed in men's councils that would shape the coming months. Though Sarah had been granted a measure of acceptance, the larger forces of history were closing in on their peaceful clearing. 2 weeks after the Mingo departure, the first refugees arrived, a small group of Delaware women and children whose village had been attacked by settlers expanding territory claims. They came seeking shelter, bearing stories of homes burned and men slaughtered for defending land their families had occupied for generations. Sarah's medical training was suddenly put to practical use. The Delaware healer had been killed in the attack, leaving the survivors wounded, needing immediate care. She worked alongside Blue Wing, treating burns, setting broken bones, and mixing poultices for infection. The suffering had faces now, not abstract tales of conflict, but real pain from real violence. Among the refugees was a young mother named Silver Dove, who'd lost her husband in the attack. Her son, barely 2 summers old, had been accidentally trampled during the chaos. The child lived but couldn't speak. Trauma had stolen his words. Sarah recognized something of herself in the woman's haunted eyes. I too lost my husband, Sarah shared, as they worked together grinding herbs for medicine. Different circumstances, but the empty place it leaves is the same. Silver Dove's hands stilled over her work. How do you fill an empty place, Shawnee? Ways seem strange to me. My village, my people, all gone or scattered. You don't fill it, Sarah offered gently. You learn to carry it differently. Build a new family without forgetting the old. Your son needs you strong. Over the following days, Silver Dove began to recover some spirit, drawn to Hope's infectious laughter and the small responsibilities of caring for an infant. Her own son started responding to Sarah's Delaware phrases, limited though they were, and the first time he giggled at Hope's antics, several women openly wept with relief. But the refugees' presence created new tensions. They brought warnings of organized settler expeditions planning to clear the territory of savages. Young warriors advocated for preemptive strikes, while elders called for better scouts and defensive preparations. Grey Fox struggled to maintain the careful neutrality that had protected the village thus far. Sarah found herself increasingly pulled into these discussions. Her knowledge of settler thinking and tactics was valuable, though painful to share. She explained the logistics of wagon trains, the types of weapons commonly available, the seasonal patterns of migration. Each detail felt like a betrayal of her birth culture, yet failing to share potentially life-saving information seemed a greater wrong. One crisp morning in early winter, Sharp Eyes, one of the village's primary scouts, returned with disturbing news. He'd tracked a band of settlers 15 miles east, including several who didn't fit the usual pattern of farmers or traders. These men carried military-grade weapons and seemed to be mapping the territory with professional precision. Grey Fox called an immediate council, this time including Sarah and the Delaware refugees. Your eyes see different signs than ours, he acknowledged through Nayeli's translation. If war visits our forest, all must prepare, all must share knowledge that protects. Sarah described the surveying equipment she glimpsed in Sharp Eye's report. Those tools make maps for land claims. When settlers make official claims, they bring law and courts. This isn't just raiding, they're planning permanent expansion. The gravity of this news silenced even the most hot-headed warriors. Legal. Claims by settlers often brought militia protection, making resistance increasingly dangerous. The Shawnee had faced this pattern before in their Ohio Valley homelands, before being pushed south and west. We must choose a path, Grey Fox stated solemnly. Stand and fight what comes. Join a stronger alliance of tribes or seek new hunting grounds before pressure becomes war. The debate continued for 2 days. Sarah contributed what knowledge she could while trying to nurse hope and maintain daily routines. Nayeli remained her primary connection to the male councils, though she noticed him growing increasingly withdrawn as tensions mounted. On the third evening, as they prepared the evening meal in companionable silence, Nayeli finally shared what weighed on him. Council asks for my voice tomorrow. Young warriors respect my hunting skill. Elders remember my father's wisdom. They ask what path I choose. Sarah set down the wooden spoon she'd been using. And what will you say? I think. He paused, struggling with both words and emotions. I think of my wife and child, lost to sickness. I think of finding you and hope, choosing mercy over leaving you to forest spirits. I think of the village accepting my choice, making a family from mercy. Now a new choice comes. He moved closer, sitting beside her near the fire. Hope slept peacefully nearby, the familiar sounds of village evening creating a gentle backdrop. War changes men. I have seen this. Makes hearts hard, hands quick to kill. My wife would want Hope to know a man who protects life, not takes it. Understanding dawned on Sarah. You think we should advocate for relocation? I think we should speak for survival, for my family, for a future where Hope knows peace, not constant watching for enemies. His words struck deep chords within her. The life she'd built here was precious, precisely because it had been chosen freely, away from the conflicts that seemed to consume both settlers and natives. But running felt like abandoning the very principles that had welcomed her: courage, community, and standing for what was right. That night, Sarah's dreams were troubled by visions of two paths, one leading to a peaceful valley where hope grew, surrounded by forest wisdom, the other showing her village transformed into a battlefield where the skills she'd learned served war rather than healing. Dawn brought clarity. As she fed hope and performed morning tasks, Sarah realized the choice wasn't binary. The village had already shown her a third way, finding strength through adaptation, wisdom through multiple perspectives, and family through choice rather than blood. When Nayeli left for the council, she asked him to speak for strategic relocation, with a purpose. Not running from fight, she explained, but choosing ground that preserves life while building strength. Find a place that connects us to trading routes, allows us to bridge between cultures, gives hope a future with options. The council debated for hours. Sarah waited with the other women, teaching the Delaware children simple English phrases while they taught her their words. Languages were bridges, she'd learned, opening possibilities for understanding that violence could only destroy. Singing. Bird sat beside her, working on a new cradle board for Silver Dove's son. Your heart speaks wisdom, the grandmother observed, having overheard Sarah's conversation with Nayeli. Many paths cross in this world. Wise travelers choose roads that lead to more paths, not walls. As afternoon shadows lengthened, the council finally reached a decision. Grey Fox emerged looking older but resolute. He called the village to gather for his announcement. Nayeli translated as the chief spoke. We have heard warnings from the east, seen signs of bigger storm coming. After long discussion, voices from many sides, council chooses a new path. Village will move to winter grounds early this year, but not in fear, in planning. He continued outlining the strategy. They would establish themselves near the three forks where major rivers met, a location offering better defense, multiple escape routes, and access to important trade networks. More importantly, the position would allow them to monitor settler advance while maintaining contacts with other villages for mutual support. This move serves strength, not weakness, the chief concluded. We take wisdom, family, future, not abandon them. All who shelter with us move together. All who share village hearth, share village journey. The refugees' relief was palpable. Having lost everything once, the promise of continued community meant survival itself. For Sarah, this decision represented something else entirely: active. Choice over passive acceptance, strategic withdrawal over either violent resistance or hopeless flight. Preparations began immediately. The autumn harvest had already been preserved, and now attention turned to portable possessions, winter supplies, and weapons needed for defense during travel. Everyone contributed according to ability. Even Hope's cradleboard was redesigned for easier portage over long distances. In the midst of this industrious activity, Sarah made a decision of her own. Calling Blue Wing and several experienced women together, she proposed establishing what she called a knowledge circle, a formal group dedicated to preserving and sharing healing wisdom that might be lost during upheaval. In our old wisdom, she explained in her improving Shawnee, settlers made journals, wrote things down to preserve them. Your knowledge lives in memory and practice. During moves and changes, both can be lost. What if we combine ways? Practice ancient healing while finding new ways to preserve it. Blue Wing surprised her by embracing the idea enthusiastically. The medicine woman had apparently been concerned about this very issue, especially with growing conflicts disrupting traditional apprenticeship patterns. They began that very day, with Sarah creating simple pictorial guides, while Blue Wing demonstrated techniques, ensuring crucial knowledge survived through multiple transmission methods. The work deepened Sarah's integration into village life. Women who had initially been skeptical of her presence now sought her unique perspective on preserving medicine knowledge. She learned family recipes for healing teas, secret locations of powerful plants, and songs that carried instructions for complex treatments. 10 days into preparation, 3 Cherokee scouts arrived bearing both invitation and warning. Their larger community offered alliance and protection, but also brought news of organized settler militias planning a major pacification campaign for spring. The window for strategic relocation was closing rapidly. Gray Fox consulted with village elders and the Cherokee visitors before announcing an accelerated timeline. They would depart in 3 days, traveling southwest to avoid the worst of early winter, while reaching their target location before frozen rivers complicated the journey. Sarah spent those final days in focused activity. She helped pack medicines, worked with other mothers to prepare children for travel, and conducted her first formal healing circle, a gathering where she combined Blue Wing's traditional wisdom with her own unique insights. The experience revealed how much she'd grown, conducting ceremonies in Shawnee, understanding plant spirits in ways her settler education had never considered, and feeling the weight of responsibility for preserving important knowledge. On their last evening in the village, many families held private ceremonies to honor the spirits of the place and ask blessing for the journey ahead. Nayeli invited Sarah to join him in visiting the graves of his wife and child, a ritual she hadn't known he performed regularly. The burial site was a peaceful glade, marked by carved stones and meaningful plantings. Sarah carried hope, while Nayeli tended the graves, speaking quietly to those who had been taken too soon. When he finished, he looked up at Sarah and Hope with expressions transformed by emotion. "They would have loved knowing her," he said simply, gesturing to Hope. Then, more softly, "would have loved knowing you." The words carried multiple layers of meaning: respect for the past, acknowledgement of the present, and perhaps a hint of future possibilities. Sarah responded by placing his hand on Hope's back, letting him feel the child's steady breathing, the life they had both fought to preserve. As they returned to the village through deepening twilight, Sarah realized how completely her existence had transformed. 4 months ago, she'd been a settler woman abandoned by her own people, facing death with a newborn in hostile territory. Now she walked through a Shawnee village as an accepted member of the community, carrying knowledge valued by medicine women, wearing clothes she'd helped craft, speaking a language that had become almost second nature. Hope stirred in her arms, making small sounds of contentment. Looking down at her daughter, who would grow up knowing multiple cultures, speaking several languages, understanding the forest in ways settlers never could, Sarah saw the future she was helping build. Not a division between worlds, but a bridging of them. Tomorrow would bring departure, uncertainty, and challenge, but tonight, as the village prepared for one last communal meal in this particular place, Sarah felt ready for whatever lay ahead. She had earned her place not through birth, but through choice, not through similarity, but through her difference. The journey south would test everything she'd learned and become, but for the first time since that wagon train had left her behind, Sarah Mitchell faced the future not with fear, but with purpose. She wasn't running to escape her past. She was walking forward to embrace a future she was helping create, and in that realization, she found not just acceptance, but belonging. Not just survival, but hope. Not just a new home, but a new self, stronger and wiser for having crossed between worlds. The first snowflakes caught in Hope's dark hair as the procession of 47 people wound through the forest. Each family carried what could be transported, leaving behind the dome dwellings that had shaped their lives for generations. Sarah adjusted Hope's cradleboard, the new design proving remarkably efficient for the long march ahead. Nayeli moved between flanking positions, his warrior training evident in the practiced way he scanned for threats. The Delaware refugees stayed close together, their eldest warrior, hawks in flight, proving invaluable for spotting signs of pursuit that Shawnee scouts might miss. "Ice comes early this year," Singing Bird observed, walking steadily despite her age. The grandmother had insisted on bringing items others deemed expendable, ceremonial pipes, story stones, and holy bundles that preserved more than memory. Forest spirits test our resolve. 3 days into their journey, the test arrived. Sharp eyes returned from morning scouts with urgent news. Tracks crossed their intended path. Fresh boot prints, at least a dozen men, moving with military precision. "Gray," Fox halted the column immediately. "Not the militia we feared," Nayeli translated as scouts shared details. "Something worse. These boots are Confederate cavalry. Deserters from southern wars becoming raiders, killed for pleasure and profit." Sarah knew the type well. Thomas had told stories of such men, soldiers displaced by conflict who had developed tastes for violence that peace couldn't satisfy. They preyed equally on settlers and natives, respecting neither law nor custom. "Can we avoid them?" she asked. Hope beginning to fuss with hunger. "Trail splits 2 miles ahead," Grey Fox explained. "Longer route adds 3 days, but follows rivers where sign washes away. Desert men can't track through water." The decision meant choosing safety over speed, a calculation that weighed heavily on everyone. Winter's approach added urgency to reaching their destination, but encountering raiders could prove catastrophic. As they resumed the march along the altered route, Silver Dove walked beside Sarah for companionship. The young Delaware mother had developed confidence during their preparation, her son gaining strength and beginning to speak again in short bursts. "You have medicine fever," Silver Dove observed, using the Shawnee term for healing sickness. "Your hands shake when not healing." Sarah realized she'd been unconsciously flexing her fingers, eager to prepare herbs and tend to any discomfort among the travelers. Dr. Coleman would have diagnosed it as nervous energy, but village wisdom recognized something deeper, the spirit's need to serve through healing. Their first major challenge came on day 7. The youngest Blake child, only 10, summers old, complained of stomach pains that rapidly worsened. When fever joined the cramping, Blue Wing's face grew grave. She'd seen this illness before, the river sickness that could sweep through traveling groups, especially when forced to drink from unfamiliar sources. Sarah worked through the night, with Blue Wing, preparing willow bark teas and creating charcoal mixtures to absorb toxins. The child's parents hovered anxiously, while others maintained respectful distance, understanding infection's pattern. By morning, 2 more children showed early symptoms. The procession halted to set up a temporary healing camp where isolation could prevent spread. Sarah found herself directing care with surprising confidence, combining settler and native knowledge to create more effective treatments. "Your medicine grows stronger," Blue Wing acknowledged as they prepared remedies, learning to trust forest spirits while keeping settler precision. The old medicine woman taught advanced techniques during this pause, reading pulse points with palm pressure, determining herb potency by moon phase, and recognizing the subtle differences between similar ailments. Sarah's questions, shaped by her different background, often led Blue Wing to articulate knowledge that had previously been intuitive. 3 days later, the children recovered enough for travel. The brief outbreak had actually strengthened the community. Everyone now understood the real value of Sarah's bridge between medical traditions. Even skeptical warriors observed the efficiency of her organized approach to patient care. "Like coordinating a hunt," Black Elk commented during a rest stop, He'd been assigned to their group by the Mingo Council, ostensibly for protection, but clearly also for observation. Many hunters worked together, each skill making whole stronger. His words contained grudging respect, evidence that perspective shifted with shared challenges. Sarah was learning that acceptance among warriors came not through dramatic gestures, but through proven competence under pressure. The journey's rhythm settled into patterns shaped by terrain and wisdom. Mornings began with scouts departing before dawn, their reports determining daily routes. Village elders consulted weather signs and river spirits, while the Cherokee guides maintained contact with advance parties preparing their arrival. Hope thrived despite the constant motion. Her presence brought light to difficult moments. Her first real laugh came while watching older children perform shadow plays by firelight. Her first words emerged as simple Shawnee syllables that delighted everyone within hearing. She speaks. The old tongue before English, Nayeli noted with quiet pride one evening. Our ways run deep in her breath. Sarah cherished these moments of connection, understanding how deeply Nayeli invested himself in Hope's development. The informal family they'd created transcended simple guardian relationships, though neither spoke its deeper implications aloud. On day 15, they faced their first major river crossing, a challenge complicated by recent rains turning the usual ford into a treacherous current. The Cherokee guide, Running Water, proved invaluable with his knowledge of seasonal flood patterns. Current follows an old channel along the far bank, he explained to Grey Fox. If we rope across the narrows, women and children can be pulled along the cable. Safer than trusting horses on slippery stones, Sarah volunteered for the first crossing, wanting to test the system before other mothers risked their children. With Hope secured in a waterproof cradle board and a rope around her waist, she felt the current's power firsthand. The cold struck through her clothing as she half swam, half walked toward the opposite bank. Reaching the other side, soaked but safe, she established a warming fire and prepared to receive others. The system worked, though several elderly members struggled, and one near disaster occurred when a young running bear became entangled in the rope. Quick action by village swimmers prevented tragedy, but the incident sobered everyone to the crossing's genuine danger. That night, as they recovered from the day's exhaustion, Sarah overheard conversations she wasn't supposed to. Some mothers expressed concern about bringing a white woman's child into their future village. Not outright hostility, but worry about the complications her presence might create during negotiations with other tribes. The words stung, despite her growing confidence in her place. She understood the practical concerns. The Shawnee were entering, a region where multiple tribes competed for resources and alliances. Her presence added layers of complexity to already difficult situations. Nayeli must have sensed her distress, appearing at their fire with fresh meat from his evening hunt. Some voices sound louder when fear speaks, he offered carefully. Most see the truth. Hope belongs to earth and sky, not just one people. Her path enriches all paths. His words helped, but Sarah recognized the need to address concerns directly. She requested time at the evening council, surprising many by speaking entirely in Shawnee. Sisters and mothers of our village, I hear worries about my daughter's place among us. These concerns come from love for our people, and I honor them. But consider this. The world changes fast around us. Children who understand many ways speak. Many tongues build bridges between peoples. They are arrows in our defense against future storms. Hope learns healing from Blue Wing, tracking from Shawnee hunters, river wisdom from Cherokee scouts. She becomes stronger for knowing many paths. Singing Bird spoke in support. My eyes have seen long seasons. When my grandmother's grandmother walked, no horses carried our people. No metal tools helped our work. Strength comes from adapting, learning, growing. This child brings no weakness to village. She brings tomorrow's strength. The response wasn't immediate acceptance, but it shifted conversations. Sarah noticed mothers watching Hope more thoughtfully, observing how naturally she responded to Shawnee games and stories. The children, unaware of deeper tensions, treated her as simply another village infant, a powerful influence on community perception. 2 weeks into the journey, they encountered signs of abandoned settlements, not native villages, but isolated homesteads left by settlers who'd attempted to claim land beyond legal boundaries. Blackened beams and scattered possessions told stories of hasty departures, probably when local tribes finally organized resistance. These reminders of the settlement's advance worried everyone. The militia tensions they'd left behind seemed to follow them even into supposedly untouched territory. Sharp Eyes reported increasing encounters with surveyor marks and land stakes, suggesting organized expansion moved faster than expected. The winter grounds we seek, Grey Fox confided through Nayeli, may not stay isolated much longer. We buy time, not permanence. But time allows us to prepare, strengthen alliances, decide our people's future path. The chief's pragmatism struck Sarah as refreshingly honest. He didn't promise impossibilities, but rather managed transitions that preserved maximum dignity and safety for the community. It was leadership shaped by centuries of displacement and adaptation, harder-won wisdom than the confident frontier. Statements she'd known in settler councils. As November deepened toward December, the journey tested everyone's endurance. Children complained less when they saw adults bearing hardship stoically. Elderly members insisted on carrying full loads despite their years. The Delaware refugees, having lost everything once, treasured every step toward security. Sarah's role expanded beyond healing into leadership. Her ability to translate between cultures helped smooth interactions with traders they encountered on the major routes. Her settler knowledge proved valuable in avoiding areas where territorial conflicts might erupt. Most importantly, her presence normalized cooperation between peoples that fear often kept apart. During particularly difficult passages, she found herself creating what she called walking songs, rhythmic chants that combined Shawnee melody with English words the travelers were learning. Children especially loved these hybrid creations, finding them easier to remember while teaching useful vocabulary from both languages. Their approach to the winter grounds revealed itself gradually through scouting reports. The described location proved as strategic as promised, a protected valley where 3 rivers merged, creating natural barriers while offering multiple escape routes. Thick forest provided windbreaks and hunting grounds. More importantly, the site connected to established trading paths without being obviously visible from major routes. Cherokee intermediaries met them 3 miles from their destination, having prepared the resident tribes for their arrival. Not everyone in the regional alliance welcomed new settlers. Their own pressures from encroaching colonials made them wary of any association with whites, even adopted ones. Sarah faced perhaps her greatest test when introduced to the local chief, Standing Bear of the Chickasaw. His pride and history demanded recognition of proper protocols. The man studied her with eyes that missed nothing, her doe-skin clothing, Shawnee beadwork, but also her unmistakable European features. Through formal interpreters, the dialogue unfolded. You claim shelter among the Shawnee. Where lies your heart's allegiance when white fathers come looking? The question carried generations of betrayal and broken trust. Sarah understood its weight as she formulated her response, choosing each word in Shawnee for maximum respect. Great Chief, my heart walks the path that saved my daughter's life. The people who accept orphans and offer family, these are my people. If white fathers come looking, they will find one who chooses honor above blood, truth above convenience. Standing Bear's expression remained neutral, but his interpreter added unexpected words. Chief notices you speak our cousin tongue. With respect, notes your child grows strong in our ways. Perhaps bridges between peoples might resist storms better than walls between them. The tentative acceptance marked a diplomatic victory for Grey Fox, whose patient cultivation of alliances proved vital for their survival strategy. But Sarah recognized her position remained delicate, a symbol of cooperation to some, but potentially a target if conflicts escalated. Settlement into the winter grounds brought new rhythms but familiar patterns. Dwellings rose swiftly with the aid of resident tribes who provided materials and knowledge of local conditions. Sarah established a healing lodge quickly, its design incorporating improvements learned during their journey. Blue Wing approved each innovation, their partnership now marked by mutual respect rather than teacher-student hierarchy. Hope celebrated her first solstice in the new location, participating in ceremonies that welcomed the turning of seasons. Warriors performed traditional dances, while elders shared stories of endurance through difficult times. Sarah contributed her own tale, not of her abandonment, but of the choice that led to belonging, emphasizing how loss and finding could intertwine. To create hope, as winter deepened over the valley, news traveled through trade networks of broader conflicts. British agents stirred up discord between French and American settlers. Spanish officials complicated native alliances with promises that history suggested were hollow. Each report confirmed the wisdom of their strategic relocation, though none claimed they'd found permanent safety. "We've moved from one chess game into another," Sarah observed to Nayeli one evening as they watched Hope sleep. "The players remain the same, just the board has shifted." Nayeli nodded slowly. "But now we understand the game better, know the moves before they happen. More important, know there are other games to play." His words pointed to something Sarah increasingly understood. Survival required not just reactive adaptations, but proactive shaping of circumstances. The knowledge they preserved, the alliances they built, the bridges they maintained between cultures, these were the tools for influencing the larger forces that threatened to overwhelm them. As the year's longest night approached, Sarah felt the weight of transformation. 4 months ago, she'd been a discarded settler facing death. Now she led healing ceremonies, counseled alliance partners, and planned for a future where her daughter would navigate worlds her own parents couldn't have imagined. The solstice celebration peaked with the traditional lighting of the Great Fire, a ritual promising the sun's return despite winter's grip. As sparks ascended into the star-filled sky, Sarah held Hope close. The baby's eyes reflected the dancing flames, wide with wonder at the spectacle. "Our people have kindled this fire for more years than stars above," Singing Bird explained, joining them at the circle's edge. "Each flame carries prayers for renewal, not just of light, but of life itself." Sarah watched the celebration with understanding eyes. These weren't primitive rituals, but sophisticated ceremonies that bound community through shared meaning. Every gesture carried significance, every song contained history, every dance enacted relationships between human and spiritual realms. When Hope's exhaustion finally claimed her, Sarah carried the sleeping child back to their dwelling. Nayeli walked beside them through the firelit village, his presence a steady comfort that had become essential to her redefined existence. Inside their home, for Sarah now thought of it as such, rather than merely a dwelling, they settled into quiet, conversation by their own hearth. Through the smoke hole overhead, stars offered timeless perspective on their small dramas. "Tomorrow brings new counsel," Nayeli mentioned, tending to the fire's coals. "Cherokee scouts report surveyors approaching from the east. Moving in winter suggests urgency. Or desperation," Sarah added. "The treaties they've broken push them into harder territory. They need resources before planned settlements can survive spring." Their analysis combined perspectives in ways that would have been impossible individually. They understood both the driving forces behind expansion and the traditional patterns of resistance. Together, they could anticipate developments that neither culture alone might recognize. Grey Fox wants your voice at council tomorrow, Nayeli revealed carefully. Your understanding of settler thinking could save many lives. Sarah's inclusion in formal councils marked how completely her role had evolved. No longer merely an adopted presence, she'd become a strategic resource. Her double perspective valued for navigation through increasingly complex situations. Sleep brought dreams of maps being redrawn, of borders shifting like sand, of hope growing to lead people who'd learned to transcend fixed identities. When morning light filtered through the smoke hole, Sarah woke not with the anxiety she'd known in settler days, but with purposeful determination. The winter grounds had given them time to prepare, to strategize, to build strength through alliance. Now that preparation would be tested. But unlike the abandoned woman who'd stumbled into this forest months ago, Sarah faced uncertainty with community support, hard-earned wisdom, and clear purpose. Rising carefully to avoid waking hope, she began planning her contribution to the council. As Nayeli stirred and reached for water to splash the sleep from his face, their eyes met in understanding. Whatever challenges approached, they would meet them not as separate individuals, but as partners in a family they'd chosen to create. The council chamber filled with the acrid smoke of ceremonial tobacco as tribal representatives gathered to discuss the surveyor threat. Sarah sat in the position Grey Fox had designated, far enough from central discussions to show respect for traditional hierarchy, yet close enough to participate when called upon. Hope drowsed in her cradle board, occasionally making the soft sounds that had become a familiar background to village life. The Cherokee translator, a thin man named Snake in the grass, presented the scouts' findings. 3 survey teams work. Separate sections, measuring land by grids. Each team marks boundaries with posts marked in English and numbers. Cherokee words say they claim water rights to all rivers within their measurements. Murmurs of outrage rippled through the gathering. Water rights formed the foundation of territorial claims. Controlling rivers meant controlling access, travel, and settlement patterns. The surveyors weren't just mapping, they were staking claims that would reshape the entire region. Black Elks, voice cut through the discussion like a blade. We should destroy their work. These posts mark no law we recognize, drive surveyors out before permanent damage happens. Standing, Bear countered with the gravitas of experience. Direct violence invites greater violence. Colonial armies wait for such excuses. Remember what happened when Shawnee war parties struck survey teams in Kentucky. Whole villages burned in response. The debate continued for hours, voices rising and falling in complex rhythms of argument and counter-argument. Sarah listened intently, forming mental maps of the political landscape as complex as any geographic chart. When Grey Fox finally signaled for her input, Sarah chose her words carefully. Settlers think in straight lines, while forests grow in curves. Their surveys divide what nature joins, waters that flow together, hunting grounds shared by many creatures, sacred sites connected by ancient paths. But stopping them requires understanding their methods, she continued, explaining how survey teams operated, the careful documentation, the legal requirements for official land claims, the military backing that typically followed civilian advance teams. Her knowledge painted a clearer picture than scouts alone could provide, not just the immediate threat, but the machinery behind it. We need more than resistance, she concluded. We need a strategy that disrupts their pattern while avoiding direct confrontation they can use for escalation. Standing Bear regarded her with newfound interest. You speak of war without warriors. Explain this white woman's thinking. Sarah drew a stick from the fire and began sketching in the ash-dusted earth. Surveyors require precise measurements. Small changes to their markers, Moving posts by precise distances, altering blaze marks on trees, creates confusion in their records. When different teams report conflicting boundaries, their own people fight among themselves before looking at us. The strategic insight sparked intense discussion. Warriors who had advocated immediate action began seeing the wisdom of subtlety. Elder chiefs recognized the approach's potential to delay or derail expansion without triggering the military reprisals they feared. Nayeli translated the council's final decision. A combined force would monitor surveyor movements, employing strategic misdirection rather than violence. Sarah's suggestion of creating false trails that led to impassable terrain added another layer of confusion. The plan required patience and coordination, but offered better prospects for long-term success. After the council disbanded, Sarah found herself surrounded by healers from various tribes seeking her knowledge of settler medicine. Blue Wing had apparently been promoting her abilities, understanding that cross-cultural medical knowledge could benefit all their peoples. "Show us this." "Writing medicine," requested White Feather, a Creek healer who had traveled far to participate in the regional alliance. Words that capture healing knowledge without speaking. Sarah's pictorial guides had impressed many during their journey, combining simple drawings with Shawnee phonetic notation. Now she faced a unique challenge, teaching written communication to oral traditions without diminishing the power of memory and practice that kept ancient wisdom alive. The healing circle that formed became a daily gathering, drawing practitioners from surrounding villages. They exchanged remedies, compared techniques, and developed hybrid approaches that surprisingly improved outcomes. Sarah learned that combining white willow bark with Cherokee bloodroot created more effective pain relief than either alone. The Greek healers introduced techniques for setting complex fractures that worked better than European methods she'd known. These exchanges cemented Sarah's role as a bridge between worlds. Every successful treatment validated her dual perspective, while each shared knowledge strengthened alliances that might prove crucial in the challenges ahead. Winter Deep's hardest months arrived with storms that challenged even experienced wilderness dwellers. The valley's protected position offered some shelter, but resource management became critical. The council implemented strict rationing protocols while hunting parties braved dangerous conditions to supplement diminishing food stores. During one particularly brutal blizzard that trapped everyone indoors for 5 days, Sarah organized what she called knowledge festivals. Children and adults gathered in the largest dwelling to share stories, skills, and songs. She taught basic English and arithmetic while learning traditional crafts and legends in return. The enforced community time transformed potential cabin fever into strengthened bonds. Hope's first attempts at crawling became village entertainment during these gatherings. The baby's determination to reach interesting objects made elders chuckle and children clap with delight. Unlike settler customs, where infants were often isolated, Shawnee traditions encourage community participation in child development. "She sees all eyes as family eyes," Singing Bird observed, watching Hope's fearless exploration. "This making her strong in spirit. Settler babies only trust a few faces." Her words highlighted subtle but profound cultural differences. In Sarah's old life, mothers bore primary responsibility for childcare, aided occasionally by family. Here, shared nurturing meant Hope learned from multiple perspectives, absorbed various skills naturally, and developed trust that extended beyond biological bonds. The isolation of deep winter also deepened Sarah's relationship with Nayeli. Their forced proximity led to conversations that might have remained unspoken in busier times. One evening, as a storm howled outside their dwelling, Nayeli spoke of concerns he'd harbored since their first days together. "When I found you in the forest, you were a shadow of two worlds," he said carefully. "Part still holding old life, part reaching for new. But shadows can't heal, can't belong fully anywhere. Sarah set down the basket she'd been weaving. And now I see you choosing each day, not holding shadow, but making light that serves both paths. He paused, struggling with concepts difficult to express. My people have a word, Hekaliteshi, means one who bridges sacred spaces. Medicine people use it for those who speak to the spirit world and the human world both. The implications struck deep. Nayeli wasn't just acknowledging her adaptation, he was recognizing a sacred role she'd begun filling without conscious intent. The healing sessions, the strategic consultations, the cultural translations, all were aspects of spiritual bridging rather than merely practical skills. What does such recognition mean? She asked, sensing uncharted territory. In old times, Hekaliteshi often lived between villages, visited by all who needed bridging. Sometimes they married into two tribes, creating family that belonged to both places. His eyes met hers steadily. Sometimes they remained apart, serving all by serving. None too close. The conversation carried implications neither had addressed directly. Their living arrangement remained practical. Two adults sharing responsibility for hope while maintaining separate sleeping quarters. But daily intimacy had created bonds deeper than convenience, connections that went beyond their original mercy-driven alliance. Change came again with the spring thaw when Blue Wing collapsed during morning gathering of medicines. Sarah rushed to her side, finding the old woman conscious but weak. The medicine woman waved away concerns with characteristic stubbornness. Old bones tired. Spring is always hard after winter wisdom gatherings. But the elder healers recognized what Sarah initially missed. This was more than fatigue. Blue Wing's years of constant teaching and travel had taken their toll. The realization sparked urgent discussions about succession in medicine knowledge. Traditionally, a designated apprentice would inherit Blue Wing's role, learning under her guidance for years before taking primary responsibilities. But circumstances had disrupted normal patterns. The hasty relocation, the blending of tribal practices, the incorporation of Sarah's foreign insights had created something unprecedented. I can't replace her, Sarah protested when the position was offered. Her knowledge runs generations deep. I'm still learning basic concepts. Grey Fox's response carried political wisdom beyond medical concerns. No one replaces ancestors, but we need wisdom that adapts to changing times. Blue Wing says your medicine served two peoples in harmony. Your difference makes strength now. The conversation continued for weeks as Blue Wing recovered slowly but remained limited in mobility. She insisted on maintaining her teaching role while Sarah handled more active responsibilities. Their combined leadership created a unique healing council that drew practitioners from even further regions. By early spring, signs multiplied that the winter's reprieve was ending. Cherokee runners brought reports of increased settler activity. To the north and east, the survey teams had returned with military escorts, suggesting more aggressive expansion plans. British agents actively recruited native scouts to report on tribal movements, while American land speculators promised quick riches for territorial information. Standing Bear called for a Grand Council representing all regional tribes. This gathering would determine whether to continue unified resistance or each group pursue separate survival strategies. The choice carried enormous implications. Alliance offered strength, but also drew attention, while dispersal might mean easier military defeat for isolated bands. Sarah prepared extensively for the council, knowing her insights would be tested more rigorously than ever. She created detailed maps combining native geographic knowledge with settler territorial ambitions. Her analysis predicted exactly where conflicts would first erupt, river crossings, salt licks, and mountain passes that both cultures needed. For survival, the Grand Council convened during the full spring moon, drawing chiefs and leaders from a region spanning hundreds of miles. The diversity challenged even Sarah's expanding cultural awareness. Shawnee, Cherokee, Chickasaw, Creek, and smaller tribes each brought distinct perspectives shaped by different relationships with competing European powers. Tensions manifested immediately. Some leaders advocated aligning with British agents who promised protection from American expansion. Others favored dealing with individual colonies, playing competing interests against each other. A third faction pushed for complete withdrawal, deeper into wilderness that might delay but not prevent eventual conflict. Sarah found herself invoked as evidence for various arguments. Some praised her successful integration as proof that selective cooperation could preserve native autonomy. Others cited her presence as a dangerous precedent, showing how easily white culture could infiltrate their societies. Her very existence became a political symbol in ways that threatened to overshadow practical considerations. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through hope. During one particularly tense session, the baby began fussing insistently. Sarah attempted to quiet her without disrupting proceedings, but Hope's determination drew general attention. Finally, the child's loud demands for nursing broke formal decorum entirely. Standing Bear, known for strict protocol observance, surprised everyone by laughing, a genuine sound that echoed through the council circle. Even the youngest among us knows council talk means nothing without tending basic needs, he declared. Perhaps wisdom speaks through babes when adults forget to listen. The moment shifted the atmosphere dramatically. Chiefs who had been posturing found themselves smiling at the universal truth of infant demands. Human connection trumped political theater temporarily, allowing more honest discussion to emerge. Sarah nursed hope while continuing to participate, showing rather than telling how different worlds could coexist naturally. Her comfort proceeding, with maternal duties while engaging complex political discourse, demonstrated the practical reality she advocated: adaptation without abandoning identity. The Council's eventual decisions reflected this shift toward pragmatism. Rather than choosing a singular strategy, they agreed to coordinate diversity. Some villages would attempt diplomatic engagement with colonial authorities. Others would pursue traditional resistance tactics, and several would serve as neutral grounds for healing and trade. This distributed approach offered multiple options for supporting all tribes as circumstances evolved. Most significantly for Sarah, the Council formally recognized the value of cultural bridges. They established a network of interpreters and mediators, not just language translators, but wisdom bridges who could navigate between worldviews. Sarah's role received official acknowledgement, bringing both honor and responsibility. The spring hunt provided a welcome diversion from political intensity. Sarah participated actively, having learned tracking skills that combined settler logic with native intuition. She developed particular talent for identifying medicinal plants during trail observation, creating dual-purpose expeditions that harvested meat and medicine simultaneously. During one hunt with mixed Cherokee and Shawnee hunters, they encountered the first direct evidence of surveyor impact: a redirected stream that flooded traditional hunting grounds. The sight enraged younger warriors who demanded immediate action against responsible parties. Sarah intervened with hard-learned wisdom. Destroying their work invites their armies. Understanding their mistakes teaches us an advantage. She proposed studying the engineering failure to predict where similar problems would develop, using surveyors' own miscalculations to create natural barriers they couldn't blame on native interference. The strategy demonstrated how her bridge role functioned in practice, not by choosing sides, but by finding approaches that preserved dignity while ensuring survival. The hunters returned with detailed information about surveyor techniques, creating intelligence that benefited the entire alliance. As spring advanced towards summer, Sarah's family life evolved alongside her community responsibilities. Hope celebrated 8 months, with recognizably Cherokee and Shawnee babbling alongside initial English sounds. The child's linguistic versatility charmed everyone, making her favorite visitor in every dwelling. Nayeli increasingly shared hunting duties with other men, taking primary care responsibility when Sarah attended healing circles or political meetings. Their partnership deepened into something neither explicitly named, but both relied upon. A family unit built from choice rather than blood, held together by shared purpose and growing affection. One evening after Hope fell asleep, Nayeli broached a subject they'd avoided. Cherokee leaders ask if we follow their marriage customs, make formal what hearts already know. The words carried multiple meanings, personal desire intertwined with political implications. Marriage would cement Sarah's status beyond question while acknowledging the family they'd created. But it also meant declaring allegiance to specific customs, potentially disappointing those who valued her supposed neutrality. "What do you desire?" Sarah asked, knowing the answer mattered more than political calculations. His response came slowly, weighted with consideration. "I desire what spirits designed when they brought you to forest clearing. But I also understand if keeping some distance serves greater purposes." The profound respect in his words nearly overwhelmed her. Here was a warrior who'd saved her life, protected her daughter, shared daily existence, yet willing to sacrifice personal happiness for what he perceived as her broader mission. "The spirits also designed hearts that choose each other," she replied softly. "Perhaps serving a greater purpose includes creating families that bridge worlds, rather than standing alone between them." Their conversation continued deep into the night, planning not just personal future, but how their union could strengthen rather than compromise her role as cultural bridge. They decided to consult tribal elders about creating new forms that honored both tradition and transcendence. Ceremonies that would affirm their commitment while maintaining bridge positions both had earned. Singing Bird's reaction to their plans proved illuminating. "Long I waited to see my nephew's heart wake to new morning. 2 winters of loss made him a shadow warrior. Now light returns through the daughter he found and the woman he saved. Make family strong. Bridges need firm foundations." Her blessing carried weight beyond personal approval. The respected grandmother's support would influence community acceptance significantly. Other elders responded similarly, each recognizing how their bond strengthened rather than threatened the cultural bridging all valued. Plans for the joining ceremony incorporated elements from multiple traditions, Shawnee, Cherokee, and even select settler customs Sarah wished to honor from her past. The event would occur at summer solstice, marking both seasonal turning and community transformation. Invitations extended to all allied tribes, making it a celebration of more than personal commitment. As preparations continued, summer's promise brought both hope and tension. Scout reports indicated surveyor teams were converging on a massive project, apparently attempting to establish an official Indian territory boundary that would essentially imprison all native peoples within defined limits. The scale suggested coordination at the highest colonial government levels. The regional alliance faced its first major test. Would they unite against this comprehensive threat, or dissolve into competing individual responses? Sarah's insights proved crucial in understanding the strategy behind surveyor movements, predicting where and how the boundary enforcement would begin. They'll start with river fords, Places where control creates natural barriers, she explained, at urgent counsel. Then move to mountain passes. The goal isn't just measurement, it's preparation for containment. Her analysis sparked intensive strategic planning. The allied tribes needed response that addressed immediate threat while positioning for longer-term survival. Sarah found herself balancing roles as healer, advisor, and bridge, while preparing for personal transition that would irrevocably tie her fate to this community. Standing by the river one evening, watching Hope crawl determinedly across smooth stones, while Nayeli hovered protectively nearby, Sarah reflected on the year's transformations. The abandoned settler woman who'd stumbled into this clearing had vanished, replaced by someone who thought in multiple languages, healed with combined wisdoms, and planned strategies, considering various cultural perspectives simultaneously. The approaching summer solstice would mark not just personal commitment, but public declaration of the path she'd chosen. No longer would she stand uncertainly between worlds. She would create spaces where different worlds could meet, communicate, and perhaps even harmonize in facing challenges too large for any single culture to overcome alone. The sun dipped below the tree line, painting the sky in colors that reminded Sarah of the beadwork Morning Star had crafted for her wedding dress. Tomorrow would bring new counsels, more urgent planning, and continued preparation for the threats gathering like storm clouds around their peaceful valley. But tonight, watching Hope's fearless exploration while Nayeli's protective presence created safety for her adventures, Sarah felt ready for whatever future emerged from the merging of their lives and their people's destinies. Dawn on the solstice arrived with mist rising from the three rivers, transforming the valley into a realm between worlds. Sarah woke to find the village already alive with preparation, women arranging ceremonial items, while children scattered flower petals along paths their elders had defined. Morning Star entered with arms full of traditional garments. Wedding. Dress requires last touches, she announced, spreading white doeskin adorned with intricate beadwork. My grandmother finished the sacred symbols at midnight. Each bead carries protection prayers. The dress combined elements from multiple traditions, Shawnee geometric patterns interwoven with Cherokee tier designs, even a small section featuring tiny crosses Sarah's late mother had taught her to embroider. The synthesis felt right, reflecting everything she had become. Nayeli refuses to see the dress until the ceremony, Morning Star giggled, revealing even warriors succumbed to romantic superstition. He spent the night purifying in a sweat lodge with other men. His nervousness makes them laugh. Sarah's own anticipation mixed with deeper concerns. The marriage would publicly declare her allegiance while surveys threatened their region. Scouts had reported movement near their valley, not armies yet, but advance parties testing routes and resources. Hope's cheerful babbling interrupted her worries. The baby had awakened extraordinarily beautiful this morning, as if sensing the day's significance. Singing Bird entered to collect her granddaughter-to-be for the Children's Blessing Circle, where elders would introduce Hope formally to the community as a future bridge between peoples. The ceremony began at noon, when the sun reached its highest point. Representatives from allied tribes gathered in the sacred grove, where oak trees had witnessed countless commitments. Gray Fox presided, his presence lending gravitas, while Cherokee and Chickasaw chiefs joined as honored witnesses. Traditional pipes circulated among leaders, while drummers established rhythms that connected earth and sky. Sarah took her position with appropriate nervousness, not from doubts about Nayeli, but from awareness of the moment's larger significance. When Nayeli appeared through the morning mist, he looked transformed by ceremonial paint and dress. His warrior strength seemed supplemented by something deeper, vulnerability perhaps, or the courage required to merge lives in uncertain times. They spoke vows in Shawnee, Cherokee, and English, each language adding layers of meaning. The promises extended beyond personal commitment to include protection of daughters, honoring of ancestors, and bridge building between peoples. The ceremony reached its pinnacle when Grey Fox bound their hands with strips from each tribe represented, declaring their union would strengthen all. Blue Wing shuffled forward despite her weakened state, presenting a medicine bundle containing herbs from both mountain and valley, symbols of joining diverse strengths. "Your path together marks new wisdom," the old healer pronounced. "May your children's children remember this day when worlds chose harmony over division. The feast that followed celebrated more than marriage. Tribal leaders previously divided by competing loyalties shared food and stories. Even Standing Bear, known for strict tradition, praised the innovation their union represented. Survival requires paths our ancestors couldn't imagine. Honoring the past includes adapting for the future." But celebration was interrupted by Sharp, eyes returning from urgent scout duty. His face carried news that turned the festive mood serious. 3 survey parties converged 20 miles east, military surveyors among them, carrying documents marked with official seals. They map comprehensive boundaries that include our valley. The timing struck everyone as ominous. Surveyor movements accelerating precisely when their community showed strength through unity. Grey Fox called an immediate council while the feast continued at lower intensity, preserving the ceremony's joy while addressing the threat. Sarah translated surveyor documents Sharp Eyes had stolen. They reference consolidation order from colonial governors. Plan calls for moving all natives into designated federal territories within 2 years. Area includes strict patrols, limited hunting rights, and mandatory settlements. The bureaucratic language couldn't disguise the meaning. Systematic confinement, designed to break tribal autonomy. The surveyors measured not just land, but futures, calculating how to compress diverse peoples into controllable spaces. We respond. "Tonight," Black Elk urged, "small parties can sabotage equipment before they complete mapping our region." "Violence invites justification," Standing Bear countered. "They wait for actions they can label aggression, bringing armies they claim necessary for protection." Sarah found herself addressing the council as both new wife and respected advisor. "We need strategy that disrupts without providing excuses. Surveyors require precise measurements. Subtle alterations make their work unreliable without obvious tampering." Her proposal gained support from unexpected quarters. Young warriors, impressed by her marriage commitment, listened more openly to subtlety over direct confrontation. Elders appreciated the respect for avoiding escalation that could destroy their carefully built alliance. The combined approach involved multiple tactics. Cherokee hunters would create false trails leading to impassable terrain. Greek scouts would introduce helpful guides, offering deliberately incorrect route information. Shawnee medicine people would employ psychological warfare, artifacts left to suggest spiritual protection, sounds in the night that unnerved survey parties. Meanwhile, Sarah coordinated information gathering through expanding networks of native traders who observed settler operations. Each piece of intelligence helped predict where surveyors would strike next, allowing protective measures. Before encroachment gained momentum, 2 weeks after the ceremony, their first major success came. Survey teams attempting to calculate valley boundaries became so confused by conflicting measurements, they accused each other of incompetence. When their arguments reached colonial authorities, delays meant precious time for community preparation. But threats evolved with the summer. Deserter raiders, now led by a particularly vicious former cavalry officer named Randolph, began systematic attacks on isolated settlements. Unlike indiscriminate violence earlier, these raids showed strategy, targeting locations that would force military response and potentially destabilize native settler relations. Sarah's healing skills proved crucial yet again when raiders attacked a small Cherokee farming community, leaving survivors with horrific injuries. Working alongside Blue Wing and local healers, they managed to save most victims while gathering intelligence about raider tactics. Randolph wants chaos, Sarah assessed after treating the wounded. Peaceful coexistence threatens those who profit. From conflict, arms dealers, territorial speculators, military contractors seeking glory and promotion. The violence complicated their marriage in unexpected ways. Nayeli faced pressure from warriors seeking more aggressive action, while Sarah struggled with guilt, knowing her presence attracted attention to their village. Hope, now walking tentatively while holding furniture, seemed oblivious to the darkness gathering around their peaceful valley. One evening, as lightning flickered on the horizon, Nayeli voiced their shared concern. "Our daughter grows into a world more dangerous than even my father faced. Alliances shift like sand. White chiefs sign papers that mean nothing. Tribes fragment under pressure. But she also inherits stronger medicine," Sarah countered, stroking his hand. "Knowledge that combines rather than divides. Languages that enable communication. Healing that draws from multiple traditions. Perhaps she'll see solutions we can't imagine." Their conversation was interrupted by commotion outside, a messenger from the Cherokee capital bearing urgent news. The Cherokee Council had responded to surveyor pressure with unprecedented action. Formal petition to the United States Congress claiming sovereign nation status. The bold move sought legal recognition to counter territorial appropriation. The petition's implications rippled through the valley. If succeeding, it might establish precedent protecting allied tribes. If failing, it could trigger a military response that threatened everyone. Sarah found herself studying documents with tribal leaders, explaining constitutional provisions few among them had understood previously. "Your knowledge of settler law serves us well," Grey Fox acknowledged. "But we also need preparation for when words fail and strength must answer." Training intensified for all community members. Sarah learned defensive warfare concepts that disturbed, yet seemed necessary. Women and elders practiced evacuation procedures, while younger warriors perfected asymmetric tactics suited to their numbers and terrain. Hope's first birthday arrived amid this balance of resistance and celebration. The village marked the occasion, with a special ceremony recognizing her as Bridge Child, daughter of two worlds, symbol of possible harmony. Gifts included a tiny bow from Nayeli, a medicine bag from Blue Wing, and beaded moccasins from village women who'd sewn prayers for protection into every stitch. Singing Bird presented a carved ceremonial pipe for Hope to hold in future years. "When she smokes, earth and sky will remember this day, remember the promise of peace even when storms rage." As summer faded toward autumn, Sarah recognized fundamental changes in herself. The abandoned woman who'd stumbled into this forest had vanished completely. In her place stood someone who thought strategically in multiple languages, planned community defense while promoting diplomacy, and deeply loved a family chosen rather than inherited. The relationship with Nayeli had deepened beyond alliance into true partnership. They shared decisions, responsibilities, and increasingly a fierce determination to protect the world they were creating for Hope. Marriage had added intimacy to respect, passion to purpose, yet challenges mounted with each passing week. Survey. Teams adapted to their disruption tactics, employing native trackers who weren't fooled by false trails. British agents intensified recruitment efforts, promising weapons and gold for information about tribal movements. American land speculators pressed colonial governors for military action against hostile territory. The turning point arrived with autumn leaves. A massive survey party entered their valley, over 30 men including soldiers, surveyors, and Native scouts who'd accepted colonial bribes. This wasn't exploratory mapping, but preparation for permanent fortification. Standing Bear's response was immediate. We negotiate while we can. Your knowledge of their customs, your marriage to our warrior, your daughter who belongs to all our peoples, these make you our strongest voice. Sarah faced perhaps her greatest test. Leading a delegating including Grey Fox, Standing Bear, and various tribal representatives, she approached the survey camp under the flag of truce. The negotiations would determine whether their valley became a battlefield or managed to preserve precarious peace. Major Henry Whitmore, the expedition's leader, studied their delegation with professional assessment. Unlike frontier commanders who saw natives as mere obstacles, he understood the political implications of his actions. Sarah addressed him in formal English while ensuring her statements were translated for native delegation. Major Whitmore, I am Sarah Mitchell of the Shawnee Nation, speaking for the tribes who have occupied this valley beyond living memory. We come to discuss boundaries that respect all people's rights. Her words carried both challenges and opening for diplomacy. The summer had taught her that survival required bold action, matched by careful calculation. As negotiations began, Sarah held her daughter's future in one hand, while extending the other in cautious hope for understanding. The fate of their valley, and perhaps the broader alliance, would be decided in the talks to follow. The negotiation tent stood in the neutral ground between cultures, white canvas walls rippling in the autumn breeze. Major Whitmore's professional bearing contrasted with the frontier swagger of his subordinates, but his eyes held the same wariness Sarah had learned to recognize in any leader faced with impossible choices. Mrs. Mitchell, Whitmore began, studying. Documents spread before him. Your reputation precedes you. Word of a white woman living among savages. He caught himself. Among the native tribes. Has reached even Washington. Some call you dangerous. Others call you valuable. Some call me Bridge, Sarah replied steadily. Just as this valley connects rivers, our community connects peoples. The question isn't whether division serves better than unity, but whether survival requires new forms of understanding. Whitmore's surveyor presented maps in crisp detail, their valley marked for federal appropriation. The official language couldn't disguise the meaning. Confiscation based on doctrine declaring unused land could be claimed by more productive. Peoples. Grey Fox spoke through Sarah's translation. These hunting grounds fed my father's fathers. The waters heal our sick. The trees shelter our children. Your paper measures only earth. We measure life. Unfortunately, Whitmore responded, Washington measures in acres and dollars. The consolidation order aims to gather scattered tribes into manageable territories. Resisting serves no purpose. The outcome remains inevitable. Sarah glanced at her allies before attempting her calculated gambit. Major, your documentation refers to establishing peaceful settlement through cooperation. We propose an agreement that achieves your superior's goals while respecting indigenous rights. She outlined a carefully crafted proposal. The valley would accept limited surveying for official records while maintaining tribal governance over daily affairs. A permanent trading post would be established that could report legitimate commercial activity, satisfying those demanding economic development. Most importantly, the community would formalize their role as neutral ground where different peoples could interact under mutually agreed rules. Your Cherokee petition gave me precedent, she acknowledged. If sovereignty can be granted piecemeal through particular agreements, perhaps this valley can become a model for managed coexistence. Whitmore thoughtfully. You speak of a compromise. We haven't considered. Most natives either resist completely or surrender entirely. Your middle path intrigues me, though my authority may not extend to such creative solutions. The breakthrough came when Sarah produced documents she'd prepared meticulously. Maps detailing natural boundaries, census data showing population, stability, and most importantly, economic projections demonstrating how mutual trade could generate tax revenue for colonial governments. "We aren't asking to be left alone," she emphasized. "We offer structured engagement that benefits all parties. The alternative, forced relocation, breeding resentment and continued raiding, costs more in gold and blood than sustainable partnership." Standing Bear added through translation, "Chickasaw memory holds treaties that became lies. You speak honor now, but will promises endure beyond your command? What guarantees can white chiefs offer?" Sarah translated this crucial challenge while formulating a response. The credibility question threatened to unravel everything they'd built toward. Whitmore surprised them by acknowledging the concern. "I've seen enough broken treaties to understand your suspicion. But consider this. My report to Washington will influence dozens of other frontier decisions. Success here could establish precedent for better relations throughout the territories." The negotiations continued for 3 grueling days. Sarah translated nuances that went beyond words, helping both sides recognize shared interests beneath cultural differences. She proposed specific mechanisms: yearly reports to demonstrate compliance, native representatives in colonial courts, and most innovatively, a council where disputes could be adjudicated according to hybrid legal concepts. On the final evening, as they finalized terms, Whitmore pulled Sarah aside quietly. "You've created something unprecedented here, but are you prepared for the consequences? Success draws attention from those who profit from conflict and those who believe races cannot mix without corruption." His warning carried genuine concern. Sarah understood that winning this negotiation might make their community a target for extremists on both sides. "Major," she replied carefully, "I was abandoned on the prairie a year ago with an infant daughter. Every day since has required facing consequences. But I've learned that choosing dignity over fear often creates strength where none existed before." That night, as the delegation finalized documents, Sarah found Nayeli waiting outside the tent. Hope slept peacefully in his arms, oblivious to the future being negotiated inches away. "Our daughter will grow knowing a different world than we knew," he observed, watching their child's peaceful breathing. "Neither fully native nor entirely settler, but something stronger than either alone." The final agreement was signed the next morning with appropriate ceremony. Tribal leaders affixed their marks, while Whitmore added his official seal. The document's language was precise. The valley would maintain autonomous governance while accepting federal oversight for specific functions. Trade would be regulated but not controlled. Most importantly, the community's unique status as a bridge between cultures received formal recognition. The Cherokee petition's success 3 weeks earlier had paved the way. Recognition of tribal sovereignty gave a framework for their hybrid arrangement. Other communities began sending representatives to study their model, but victory proved incomplete. Randolph's raiders responded to the peace agreement with escalated violence, attack settlement 5 days' ride from their valley. The massacre clearly aimed to provoke military retaliation that would void their agreement before implementation. The test came sooner than expected. Survivors stumbled into their valley, seeking medical aid and protection. Sarah organized an emergency response while community leaders debated the political implications. Providing help could be interpreted as taking sides, exactly what the raiders intended. Standing Bear spoke with measured wisdom. The agreement protects us only if we prove its value. Healing wounded shows strength, not weakness. Let Whitmore see how bridge building serves all peoples. The healing effort showcased everything their community had become. Blue Wing worked alongside Sarah while Cherokee and Creek medicine people contributed unique treatments. Hope, now toddling with determination, brought light to the recovering wounded by distributing simple gifts her village aunties had taught her to make. Major Whitmore arrived to witness the medical operation at its height. He stopped when he saw Sarah simultaneously instructing native healers in sterilization techniques while applying traditional poultices a settler doctor might have dismissed. I expected to find either savage medicine or desperate attempts at white practices, he admitted. Instead, I see something that transcends both. His official report to Washington carried weight. The Valley community demonstrates that hybrid governance produces superior outcomes for frontier stability. The proposed model deserves replication rather than skepticism. Spring arrived with confirmation. Their agreement survived review by colonial authorities. More significantly, similar experiments began elsewhere as word spread of the Valley's success. Tribal delegations arrived seeking Sarah's advocacy in their own negotiations. The year's culmination came with Hope's second birthday, celebrated as the anniversary of their community's formal recognition. Representatives from a dozen tribes gathered alongside colonial observers, creating an unprecedented mixture of traditional ceremony and diplomatic recognition. Grey Fox, growing frail but remaining sharp-minded, presented Hope with a special gift, a small book bound in doeskin and paper pages. Its pages contained writing in 3 languages, Shawnee, Cherokee, and English, recording the community's founding stories. "Let your daughter know," the old chief proclaimed through Sarah's translation, "that courage can create new nations, that wisdom speaks many languages, that family grows stronger when we choose each other rather than only blood." Nayeli added his own gift, a small necklace combining elements from his warrior heritage and Sarah's medical symbols. The pendant featured an arrow crossed with a medicine bundle, representing the protection and healing that defined their life together. But the greatest gift was stability itself. Their hybrid arrangement had survived its first year, creating ripple effects across the frontier. Other communities adapted their model, finding middle paths between complete resistance and total surrender. Sarah reflected on the transformative journey as she watched Hope play with other children. The abandoned woman had discovered not just survival but purpose. Her daughter would grow with advantages neither culture alone could provide: multilingual fluency, cross-cultural wisdom, and the understanding that bridges built stronger than walls divided. "Think she'll forgive us?" Nayeli asked, joining her observation of their daughter's fearless interaction with diverse playmates. "Forgive us what?" "For making her a symbol when she just wants to be a child." Sarah smiled, watching Hope's determined communication, combining gestures and words from multiple tongues. "I think she already understands something we're still learning, that being bridge means helping others cross without sacrificing who you are." 10 years later, as a new treaty expanded their community's success formula across the territories, Hope would return from her education in both traditional and colonial systems. She'd become the first official cultural liaison appointed by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, working to translate literal treaties into living agreements that honored all signatories. The valley would grow into a small town featuring architecture mixing native and settler designs. Healing Lodge and courthouse would stand side by side. Children would learn multiple languages alongside multiple histories. And at the center, the trading post that had seemed like compromise would evolve into a true crossroads, where diverse peoples met not with suspicion, but curiosity. But on that second birthday celebration, as autumn colors painted the valley in brilliant transformation, Sarah could only see the present moment. Hope's delighted laughter echoed as Singing Bird taught her a traditional song. Nayeli's steady hand found hers, their joined strength a reminder of the family they'd chosen to create. This was her answer to abandonment. Not isolation, but connection. Not surrender to either side of cultural division, but creation of spaces where both could exist. Not the erasure of identity, but its expansion into something richer than either culture alone could imagine. The wagon train that had left her behind had rolled on toward their own destinies. But Sarah had discovered that being cast out created opportunities for those brave enough to claim them. In the end, she hadn't been saved by the Shawnee hunter who found her. They had saved each other, building together a future neither could have conceived alone. As the celebrations continued late into the night, Sarah held close two precious certainties. Her daughter would grow knowing home wherever bridges needed building, and love transcended any boundary humans thought to impose. The valley echoed with songs in multiple languages, ceremonies from various traditions, and the laughter of children who saw wonder rather than strangeness in their community's unique composition. This was what miracles looked like when they emerged from courage rather than surrender. Not magical transformation, but persistent choice, day after day, to build understanding rather than walls. And in the darkness beyond their firelight, the forest itself seemed to hum with approval, as if ancient spirits recognized that something rare and valuable had taken root in this particular place. Something worth protecting, worth nurturing, worth carrying forward into futures that would surely bring their own tests of what home and family could mean. The story ended where it truly began, not with abandonment, but with the choice to belong. Up. Next, you got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.